Good morning and welcome to our discussion this morning, The Future of Federal IT, an outlook from Congress and the administration. I'm Jim Cook, MITRE Vice President for Strategic Engagement and Partnerships and the Chair for our Center for Data-Driven Policy. We created the Policy Center almost a year ago to bring policymakers, policy influencers, and those that execute policy together around data and evidence to help shape actionable, equitable policy decisions. Federal IT is a topic on which much has been done from a legislative, policy, and practice standpoint. We continue to see much progress made within agencies and on some cross-agency efforts, thanks to the actions of Congress, the Federal CIO's office, and the executive branch CIOs. In fact, our speakers today can personally take a lot of credit for this progress. However, the pace of change continues to lag behind the growth of technology, the increasing threats and risks to technology-dependent infrastructure, and the expectations of mission owners and the public. One data point of note, despite the money spent to date, the actions of oversight, and the agency strategies and plans that have been put in place to address this issue, the percentage of federal dollars spent on maintenance of legacy systems is actually increasing. So it's critical now more than ever that all of the key players in this process, Congress, the administration, CIOs, and their private sector partners, work transparently and closely together to align policy priorities, practices, and programs, and that the CIOs in particular have the tools, authorities, and partnerships necessary to accelerate the pace of progress. In our conversation today, you'll hear from leaders who are working towards this alignment and taking the necessary actions to accelerate digital transformation in the federal government. To introduce our speakers today and lead the discussion, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Dave Powner. Dave is MITRE's Director for Strategic Engagement and Partnerships, and he's the Executive Director for the Center for Data-Driven Policy. Dave likely needs no further introduction to this community, but I should note that prior to joining MITRE almost 3 years ago, he served 2 stints at GAO, the last serving for 16 years as the Director for IT Issues, where he reviewed the federal IT portfolio. Dave himself can take some credit for helping to push forward with the authorities and resources that CIOs have at their disposal today. Dave, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome. We have a very exciting hour planned. First, we will hear from Representative Gerry Connolly, and that will be followed by a discussion with Maria Roat and Dave Zvenyach. At the conclusion of both of these sessions, we will have about 10 minutes for audience questions. So during their remarks, please tee these up in the Q&A box. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Representative Gerry Connolly, who is serving his 7th term from Virginia's 11th District. Representative Connolly is a senior member of the House Oversight and Reform Committee and serves as chairman of the Subcommittee on Government Operations. Representative Connolly has been the consistent leading congressional oversight voice for federal IT for quite some time. He co-authored FITARA, or more accurately referred to as the Connolly ISA Act. Many of you are quite familiar with his scorecards that have been issued every 6 months since 2015. His oversight also includes ensuring that we get the right results from the MGT Act. That includes working capital funds and administering the TMF. It's my pleasure to welcome Representative Connolly. The floor is yours, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you for having me. Thank you, Jim and Sarah. And let me also say that Dave Powner is being a little bit modest. Dave Powner had a lot to do with our actually getting federal IT modernization on the high risk list when he was at GAO. He worked diligently with us in developing the scorecard after the passage of the Connolly ISA bill. And I'm very proud of the fact that we're maybe the only committee that has systematically had oversight hearings on that scorecard on a bill, now into our 7th or 8th cycle. And no small part of that was due to Dave Powner in developing the metrics, in developing the analytics, in identifying categories for scores, and in working with federal agencies to make sure that they were not only in compliance, but performing well. We've made a lot of progress. We got a lot more to go, but Dave Powner, you were a critical part of that. We miss you. It was our loss, but MITRE's gain. This past year has been challenging for all of us, but also served as an opportunity to remind the country how much we depend on the federal government and the federal workforce in a time of crisis. Throughout the pandemic, the federal government never closed. In fact, our federal workforce, which many participating in today's event represent or have worked for, has continued to work throughout the unprecedented time and has even ramped up efforts to ensure that the public has access to critical services, including unemployment benefits, small business loans and grants, and financial relief provided by Congress through the IRS. And yet, despite the commitment of the federal workforce and swift bipartisan congressional action that provided unprecedented levels of economic assistance to the country in need, those in need had their money and their misery often slowed down and exacerbated by broken IT systems. My office was flooded with phone calls from desperate constituents fighting for the stimulus checks, unemployment insurance benefits, or at their wits' end because the Small Business Administration website continued to crash. These benefits proved to be a critical lifeline for tens of millions of people, but the surge in reliance on them exposed failures in public service delivery. We cannot and should not be satisfied with the status quo. I've been working to improve the posture of federal IT throughout my 13 years in Congress, and modernizing federal IT systems that impede agencies from serving the public and carrying out their mission has been the cornerstone of that work. That's why today's topic is so critical. The future of federal IT is critical and integral to everything we do. It means an agile federal workforce that can respond quickly during uncertain events, and a workforce that can rely on the technology and supply chains to deliver results to the people we serve. It means more innovation, where we empower federal employees to think creatively on how federal agencies deliver missions and services to the public. It means investing in IT modernization, not only to help employees do their work more effectively, but to help deliver critical services seamlessly to the public. And it means a continued focus on cybersecurity, so that important data and information are secure and remain private. As chairman of the Subcommittee on Government Operations, federal IT is a priority for us. While Congress should continue to work to provide agencies with funding and resources required to improve and modernize IT postures, those benefits must go hand in hand with congressional oversight. Federal government spends $96 billion a year in IT, and 80%, some estimate, goes to maintenance and legacy systems. Federal IT projects, however, frequently fail. They go over budget, or they face unexpected delays. Threats to federal IT infrastructure continue to grow in number and sophistication. The SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange hacks clearly demonstrated the unique patience, sophistication, and aggressiveness of those who would inflict harm. Yet, despite 20 years worth of laws and guidance calling for federal agencies to improve IT postures, planning, and workforce, many agencies continue to miss the mark. Agencies responsible for performing critical government functions often operate on legacy systems, some of which are almost 50 years old. As they age, these legacy systems become more expensive to maintain, more vulnerable to cybersecurity risks, and less effective in accomplishing agency missions. We saw with the coronavirus pandemic, the ability to deliver timely emergency assistance to the public both rose and fell on whether the IT was up to the challenge, whether it was the IRS and trying to get direct payments to American families, or the E-Trans IT system at SBA to pump $600 billion in a new program, 30 times its annual budget, I might add, in 1 month. The demand was overwhelming. The changes were hard to program for them in their IT system, and the system often crashed, denying small businesses the loans and grants, the lifeblood they needed to stay in business. And of course, we've seen multiple failures all across 50 states in 50 individual unemployment insurance systems. And that has to be addressed as well. Our IT systems have to be able to accommodate crisis, because crises are not going to accommodate to us. For too long, agencies have been getting by with modest patches to their IT systems and only modernizing enough to get through an immediate problem. It's time to pull back and consider real IT modernization, which means retiring legacy systems, upgrading IT to 21st century standards, and making sure they're cyber secure. The more severe cyber posture includes ensuring effective information sharing among agencies and between agencies and cloud service providers. That's why supporting the GSA's Fedramp program is so imperative right now. My Fedramp Authorization Act, which has passed the House 4 times in the span of a little over a year, would accelerate the type of modernization for the Fedramp program, while addressing many of the concerns raised by government and industry stakeholders since its creation in 2011. In the 117th Congress, our subcommittee will continue to hold hearings to examine the federal IT's postures and educate not only the public, but my colleagues in Congress on how IT is not just a nice thing to have that makes us more efficient. It is integral to the mission we care about. And I think the pandemic gave ample demonstration of that. So I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you for having me here today, and we'll continue in this important mission.
Representative Connolly, thank you for your comments. We're going to take some questions from the audience here in a moment, but I'd like to go ahead and just kick that off. So if you could think about those questions and please put those in the Q&A box, Congressman, that would be great. You mentioned a number of key areas, piecemeal modernization and addressing legacy systems, as well as all the cyber challenges we have, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, the TMF is going to be a big part of helping to tackle some of those challenges. Can you discuss your oversight plans for the TMF?
Yeah, you know, we should back up just a little bit. I think the TMF kind of exposed both the good and the bad in how the federal government and the Congress approach the issue of IT modernization. So President Biden, I think very wisely, proposed originally in his COVID-19 package $10 billion for IT, $9 billion of which would be for the Technology Modernization Fund. That fund would be used to upgrade systems. We approved it in the House, but in the Senate, they zeroed it out. And they zeroed it out because they felt that IT modernization was tangential to COVID relief during a pandemic. Now, how anyone could have observed how critical technology is in its successes and in its failures during the pandemic, I do not know. But the Senate, in its wisdom, that was their conclusion. And so we had to fight real hard to get some of that money restored. We got $1 billion. It's not going to transform the world. And we're talking about a $96 billion enterprise, at least, as you know, Dave, that maybe 70 or 80% of which is used just to maintain old systems. So we need an infusion of new capital to catalyze replacement of those systems. And that's a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar kind of enterprise for many big federal agencies. So the TMF is going to be a critical catalyst in everything we're doing. And we want to make sure there are clear guidelines, that there are incentives for people to use it, that there be clear plans developed, and that we monitor that so that they stay on track, and that if there are problems, they're addressed quickly. They're not allowed to fester, or we don't see big, huge losses because nobody was sort of paying attention to the contracts. So I think there's a real opportunity here for transformative action and to add a catalyst for federal agencies to really push aggressively in their IT modernization efforts. And our subcommittee obviously will play a big role in both helping to develop the criteria, encourage the plans, and monitor the oversight of their implementation.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Connolly. Sticking with the MGT Act theme here, so, a key part of the MGT Act was also the working capital fund concept, and I know that's on your scorecard, and we continue to see low grades on your scorecard with the working capital funds. How do we get these funds better established and utilized?
I've introduced legislation that I hope would do that. But what we, from our point of view, the MGT Act basically authorized agencies to have working capital funds and use them. What we're discovering is that some agencies rely on advice from their general counsel, their legal counsel, and in some cases they've formed the funds. In some other cases they have not, because they've been advised legally they don't have the authority, even though the law we passed says you do. So we're going to probably have to revisit that law, and we're going to have to work with the Appropriations Committee, because this becomes a bit of a turf battle in terms of what can you do with appropriated dollars and who has jurisdiction over that. But from my point of view, it's just critical every agency have a working capital fund so that they can stay abreast of changes in technology, that they can implement the latest encryption programs and measures to protect the assets in the databases and the proprietary information, and retire those legacy systems. So I see that as another critical piece in addition to the TMF, the fund. Every federal agency's got to have a working capital fund and have a plan for how they're going to use those funds to best advantage.
All right, thank you. I'm going to try to sneak one more question in here before we turn it over to audience questions. I can see we have several in the QA box, and keep those coming. One question for you, and clearly you have a number of legislative activities going on, Mr. Chairman. I noticed the latest is this Performance Enhancement Reform Act, and it seems like it's another effort to continue to enhance CIO authorities and address legacy systems. Can you discuss a little bit your intent with that piece of legislation?
So for one thing, we want to make sure the CIO is sort of at the table. Right now, in terms of performance plans, current law only requires that the Chief Human Capital Officer contributes to the creation of an agency's performance plan. There's no mention of the CIO, and that makes no sense at all from our point of view. So we want to enhance the role of the CIO and make sure he or she has a seat at the table. And we also want to make sure that we integrate IT modernization and evidence metrics so that the performance plan is actually meaningful and can have an impact, and then monitor that as well. So I have introduced a bill, the Performance Enhancement Reform Act, that would do those things. We want to kind of make the performance enhancement, the Performance Act or planning a more meaningful exercise for federal agencies that actually could be a vehicle for positive change and reform, as opposed to a perfunctory check the box, I'm supposed to do that and I did it. But we've got to make sure the right people have a seat at the table, and certainly one of the right people is the CIO.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Congressman, we appreciate your time. If you still have time, we have several questions from the audience, and maybe I'll turn it over to folks who are monitoring that for our first one.
Sorry, I was on mute. Dave, we have a question from Jason Miller from Federal News Network, following up another question on the MGT Act. Senator Hassan mentioned a possible fix to the MGT Act to make it easier for agencies to establish IT working capital funds. Are you looking at anything similar? What are your plans to help agencies really make the most out of IT working capital funds, which potentially are more effective than the TMF?
Yeah, as I said a little bit earlier, we are looking at legislation to try to fix or clarify the authority we think agencies already have in the MGT Act. But given the fact that a number of legal counsels in federal agencies are counseling the heads of their agencies that in fact they don't have the authority because of other strictures in law, we're going to have to clarify that. And either we do it legislatively or we do it with sort of a policy dialogue with agency heads and their general counsels. But my guess is at the end of the day, we're probably going to need a clarification in law.
Great, and I think Jasmine, you have some questions lined up there for the Congressman?
Yes, Congressman, we have a couple of questions. I'm going to kind of merge a couple of them together. The questions are along the lines of, with the MGT, will we see federal agency not receiving less funds directly for their IT projects? Will Congress take the view that the money should come from there instead of giving the agencies directly funding in their budgets?
You know, it's very difficult for me to predict what Congress will do. You know, part of this is an education effort. You know, I talked about how the Senate at one point had zeroed out the TMF. We went from a $10 billion request in the president's proposed legislation to zero. And we were able to restore $1 billion of that, which, depending on how you look at it, the appropriated level had been 25 million. So to go from 25 million to $1 billion was progress, but to go from 10 billion proposed to $1 billion was a little disconcerting. We have to educate members of Congress that this is not, you know, something that's mechanical, that's just a commodity to be managed, and we'll get to it someday. You know, IT is integral to everything we do. Now, members of Congress get that about, for example, broadband, but I don't know that they get it about the state of play within the federal government itself. And so we've got a constant effort here to educate members about how critical this is. And again, I mentioned Dave Powner and GAO earlier. GAO did a huge service in identifying federal IT modernization as a high-risk category. That really helped put it on the map and helped us in getting colleagues to focus on this. But there aren't a lot of members of Congress, surprisingly, who focus on this. Despite many of my colleagues being, you know, tech gurus and feeling that they're pretty conversant with technology issues from a policy point of view, very few of them actually kind of get involved in the federal IT part of it. And that can be both good and bad, right? It allows those of us who do have an interest to have maybe, you know, disproportionate influence. But on the other hand, we're talking to an audience that is not always receptive because they're just not familiar. So we've got a lot of work to do in that regard. But I would certainly be counseling my colleagues that this is not a zero-sum game. I mean, we've got to be adding and enhancing resources if we're going to make this big ship turn around.
Another question that we have from the audience, can you say a little more about what kind of IT projects you think are going to be most well received when it comes to being eligible for minimum repayment with the changes in the TMF?
Well, that's a little hard to predict because every agency is different, right? So if you're the Small Business Administration, you may want to look to revamping your E-Trans system so it's more agile. It has more capacity. It can be easily reprogrammed and can go, and it can expand and contract depending on level of demand. And I think that, you know, I think that's a real object lesson during the pandemic of what can go wrong with IT systems that haven't been really upgraded, right? Now, in fairness to SBA, nobody saw the pandemic coming. But remember that in 1 month, April of last year, we increased SBA's budget 30-fold. Their annual budget's $20 billion a year for loans for small businesses. We gave them $600 billion in 1 month and wanted it out the door fast because we were trying to save the economy and save the collapse of small businesses and Main Street businesses all over America. And to do that, we added financial institutions qualified to manage those portfolios, many of them first time. The SBA wasn't used to that. We limited the paperwork requirement for eligibility. We had new conditions in terms of you got to keep the payroll going, right? Don't lay off people. That's why we call it the Payroll Protection Program. And we even had minimum conditions that for most of these businesses, the loan could quickly be transformed into a grant, depending on meeting the conditions, which were not onerous. The financial paperwork and documentation, very minimal. Well, their system simply wasn't agile. They couldn't adopt to that easily. And a lot of the good intentions with an enormous, unprecedented amount of money were not met or were delayed. And so looking at projects that build in more agility, more capability, obviously will be a high priority. But also integrating systems and also making sure that we're addressing encryption so that we are less cyber vulnerable. Because during the pandemic, I can tell you the number of cyber hacks, attacks, probes went up exponentially. And so protecting, helping federal agencies develop technology and techniques to protect the assets is really also going to be something very important, I think. And then, of course, retiring legacy systems. I mean, what could go wrong if you're still using COBOL and a 50-year-old, mainframe system, which every day gets harder to maintain. There are fewer people every day who even know how to do that. Hard to get replacement parts, and they're big, consumers of energy. They're inefficient, and it's just not. It's almost mind-boggling, given the pace of technology, that we're still debating that. So all of those, I think, are going to be in the category of qualification for TMF funding.
Representative Connolly, hard stop here at 10:30, so we want to thank you so much for your time and for your leadership. We're really looking forward to watching your various legislation and your upcoming hearings over this next Congress. And again, thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you again, MITRE, for having me here today.
Take care. Next up, I'd like to introduce our next panel. We're going to follow a similar format here. We're going to have a couple opening remarks, and then I'll kick off some questions, and then we'll also have some questions from the audience. But Maria Roat is Deputy Federal CIO and brings a wealth of experience to OMB. She has held numerous IT leadership positions at transportation, DHS, and SBA, including being a CIO and a CTO. She has also served our country in the U.S. Navy for 26 years in various technology and engineering positions. We are all very fortunate to have someone with her experience and reputation of delivering results in this role. We also have with us Dave Zvenyach, who is Deputy Commissioner of GSA's Federal Acquisition Service and the Director of the Technology Transformation Services. In his position, he oversees the Presidential Innovation Fellows, 18F, the Office of Solutions, that includes products like Fedramp and Login.gov, and the IT Modernization Centers of Excellence. Dave is not new to either GSA or TTS. From 2016 to 18, he held a number of positions there that included being the Executive Director of 18F. So welcome, and we'll start with Maria's opening remarks.
All right, good morning, Dave, and thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here with Chairman Connolly as well as Dave Z. Good to see you. It's always an exciting time to be in federal technology, right? And there's never a lack of activities, number of initiatives, and things that are underway. And certainly now, we have an eye towards improving our customer experience. Congressman Connolly referenced that, working with the public and making sure that our services are available, right? So as we look towards customer service, we're looking federal enterprise, cross-government initiatives, and really running IT like a business. Sustain long-term modernization to run, grow, transform our systems continues to be critical. And then more tactically and top of mind for federal technology and the CIO Council includes activities like the TMF ARP, the Cyber Executive Order, cross-government collaboration, IT portfolio management. I've been really impressed with the number of TMF, the initial project proposals we received. We're evaluating all of those now, and certainly with an eye towards those 4 categories that we shared out a couple months ago. But again, those cross-cutting opportunities that really address federal-wide and an agency enterprise services and capabilities. And with the repayment flexibilities, the board received proposals from across the federal government, agencies, bureaus, just across the whole landscape, including DoD. And with the TMF proposals, we're connecting the dots, tying the investments to overarching strategic plans, mission requirements, mission outcomes, as well as we're considering agency budget submissions, right? Looking at 22 as well as 23. And I'll also add that the groundwork we laid over the last 3 years with the TMF board, so the board and the PMO are adjusting and we're scaling very quickly to meet the demand of the proposals as they're coming in. We need to make sure that we maintain the quality, the governance, and the rigor that made all of the prior awarded projects successful. We're increasing our capacity. We've added alternate board members, again, scaling the PMO and accelerating reviews without impacting the quality of what the board reviews. And as expected, we're seeing large-scale modernization, cybersecurity projects that require multi-year and just sustained continuous investments. And I'm really excited by the number of projects and the ability to prioritize those projects that cut across agency, address those security gaps, and improve the public's ability to access government services. The CIO Council and the Federal CIO continues to highlight how we run IT as a business, in business terms, outcomes, the business value of technology, because we know technology is the enabler of mission outcomes. IT is continuing to play a leadership role in helping the government navigate, exploit technology to enable its mission, even as we're automating, bringing in RPA, the Internet of Things, and all the emerging technologies that are coming through. So we're continuing to really have that foundation, making sure technology is the foundation of the government. Congressman Connolly referenced this also in his remarks, right? From the public to nearly every mission, business, program, as well as employees. They all need to access the application and the services that we, all of us collectively, we provide. This has shifted IT to the center of mission and business space, forcing executives across the government to account for technology and data in decision-making processes. So Dave, thank you, and I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Maria. Greatly appreciate it. Before Dave takes the floor here, I want to remind everyone that we will have 10 minutes or so for questions at the end of this. So start thinking about those and putting those in the QA box, please. And Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for MITRE for having me here and for hosting this event. As Dave mentioned, I'm Dave Zvenyach. I'm the Director of Technology Transformation Services at GSA, and I go by Dave Z. So if you ever hear Dave Z, I'm the guy, and it is a delight to be here today. As you've heard already by now, the federal government is facing some tough challenges. But one of the things that's really exciting is that we're tackling those challenges. Being back in the federal government and at TTS, which I think is the go-to provider for government, go-to provider in the government for technology, we're really at the forefront of helping agencies and partnering with industry to see change not only for those agencies, for themselves, but really for the American public. We've heard talk about the TMF and the recent funding there, but we've also had an increase in funding in the Federal Citizen Services Fund, or the FCSF at GSA, and the American Rescue Plan more broadly expects to be transformational in this market. Whether it's the $1 billion, which is managed by GSA with the coordination in OMB, that gives agencies an opportunity to make those strategic investments to strengthen federal government security, to help agencies modernize, to bring state-of-the-art tools and infrastructure to a changing world, and improve the citizen experience that Maria mentioned. It's really important to central emergency relief, and we expect it'll provide multi-year transformational projects across the federal enterprise. And beyond that, though, we do anticipate using the $150 million for the Federal Citizen Services Fund to enhance how the government operates digitally, funding multiple projects within TTS, such as digital.gov, USA.gov, data.gov, challenge.gov, the US Web Design System, or search.gov. The FCSF really drives innovation in government and includes using technology to improve transparency, security, and the efficiency of federal operations, while also increasing public participation. We're really committed to serving the public at TTS and modernizing the way Americans interact with the government. And we're eager to help government-wide citizen-facing services recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, rebuild for a more secure and effective public digital experience, and really reimagine the way that digital services are delivered to improve transparency, security, and efficiency to bolster public confidence in government. I wanted to speak directly to the congressional and executive branch priorities that we're focused on right now as we think about the FY22 budget, and providing some focus on our work. So as I mentioned, the American Rescue Plan funding and execution is one of our major priorities, and we're really making sure that we're coordinating with our partners in OMB, with other parts of the federal enterprise, the CIO Council and beyond, as well as our congressional overseers. But in addition, I wanted to speak a little bit to a program that Congressman Connolly mentioned, which is Fedramp. Fedramp sits within the Technology Transformation Services. And when I rejoined GSA, I was keenly interested in Fedramp to see both the opportunities and the challenges that the program faces. As Congressman Connolly notes, the program is successfully supporting agency partners adopt new cloud services and enable cloud service providers to really make their tools available to agencies and get the benefit of reuse across the federal enterprise. Fedramp is what I consider a true partnership between government and industry in an effort to modernize IT infrastructure while protecting federal information and data. Collectively with our partners and based on feedback from stakeholders, we're constantly looking to automate and to find opportunities and efficiencies for the program. One thing I'd like to sort of highlight, and this is kind of recent news and it's exciting, is the Fedramp program has been working alongside NIST to standardize authorization packages and streamline the review with a common machine readable language known as OSCAL, or the Open Security Controls Assessments Language. And recently, we just released version 1.0.0 of OSCAL. This is a major deal because with OSCAL, activities such as preparing, authorizing, reusing services will really require less time and resources on both the government and industry sides. And on top of that, by using machine readable authorization packages, we anticipate that cloud service providers will be able to create their system security plans more rapidly and accurately, validate a lot of their content before it even gets submitted to the Fedramp PMO, and that agencies will be able to expedite their review of the security packages as well as the third-party assessment organizations, that what we call the 3 PAOs, will be able to automate the planning, execution, and reporting of cloud assessment activities. And that's just part of the work that we're doing within Fedramp to really improve our experience both on the government side and on the industry side. So in closing, as I think some of you may have heard me over the years say, one of my main goals in this is to really improve the value that we provide at TTS and increase the trust that the American public holds with the federal enterprise. The COVID experience has taught many things to many people. But we've increasingly learned, and Congressman Connolly emphasized this, that we can no longer take our services for granted, and we can no longer operate in isolation. to serve the public, we need to work beyond organizational boundaries. We need to work outside of the comforts of our org charts and reporting chains. And we need to focus on new ways to work together in a constantly shifting environment. And I really am gratified and looking forward to continuing to push forward in this way and supporting agencies and leaders like Maria and others to support administration goals that provide value and increase trust. Thanks for giving me some time to chat.
Dave, thank you very much, and great, awesome updates on Fedramp, so thank you. I'm just going to kick off the questions here, just starting with Maria. Maria, you mentioned, made several comments about mission and business outcomes and how important that is. And I know historically, when you look at federal IT, that's something we have over the years have gotten better at, but we still have a ways to go. Can you talk a little bit about how we get there with the business and mission connection, and in particular, the role of the CIO in that?
Wait, where's that phrase? You're on mute. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, you know, when for the direction of federal technology in the role of the CIO, there's certainly a vision of creating a seamless government, right? To harness technology to stay nimble, resilient, secure, all of those things. And there's a few focus areas for federal IT, and I think I hit a couple here. So one, we need to make sure, and I mentioned this in my opening remarks, designing and building for people, right? Building services and offerings across the government that use human-centered design to provide a better user experience, right? Not only is it just the technology, but building a better experience even when we do that. And this isn't just the external, this is the internal customer, our federal employees too, not just the public. And I think the IDEA and the Cases Act are really two areas that could be really foundationally impactful for better user experiences, whether they're internal or the public. And with that, the CIO Council continues to lead projects on cross-government collaboration, internet connectivity capabilities, whether it's email, calendaring, text chat, document sharing, collaboration, the video conferencing. So we're continuing to drive that experience and that customer experience. I think second, 21st century technology, right? Making sure that we're providing modern technology that's intuitive, again, easy to use, responsive, and definitely equity preserving, right? This is where the ARP, the 1 billion, the use of shared services, for example, will not only address the legacy systems, but enable the federal government to run, grow, and transform. Third, we have to be secure by design, building in security. We saw the cyber executive order. There's 44 actions in there for OMB alone, and this is really going to move the needle across the federal government and accelerate what we're doing around technology, right? From implementing zero trust architectures to logging, storage, the supply chain, all of those things that are in the executive order. And I think finally, data will be, continues to be an area of focus. So data-driven, establishing the supporting infrastructure so that we can accelerate data sharing across the federal government. We've got a federal data strategy, annual action plans, and those are really collectively elevating the data maturity of the federal government. And the CDO Council, of course, is really critical to facilitating that strategic engagement. And as we look across the federal government, there are just cross-cutting linkages across all of those things that I mentioned, intersections across all of them, and of course includes the workforce too.
Excellent. Thank you, Maria. I'm going to just shift this just slightly. An important topic for the administration is equity. So Dave Z, can you talk a little bit about how you're addressing equity and accessibility issues?
That's a great question. One of the things that I think is really is important is that within TTS, we view equity as diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as core to who we are and really critical to our long-term success as an organization. And it goes in a couple of different directions. First, we need to make sure that we are supporting internally how we focus on our hiring, how we focus on our practices and policies within the organization, and really making sure that we show up for DEIA within TTS. But we also think that it's really important that we think about how we do this more broadly for our agency partners and the public. So as I mentioned, the Federal Citizen Services Fund covers a range of different initiatives. One of those initiatives is a program called 10X. And 10X is an effort that takes ideas and sort of gets them from concept into something that might be reusable across the government. And recently, as part of the 10X program, we did what we call a round. And we did a round that included an investment theme around equity and delivery, and really saw some fascinating investments, everything from a central digital civil rights portal, to helping individuals find information about their civil rights, thinking about how we might be able to help individuals who are exiting incarceration learn about services available to them, and expanding language translation services within the government and beyond. And it really, I think this sort of is part of what we're seeing as more broadly in efforts to say, well, how can we just take all of the different services that we're doing, make a comprehensive look to see, are we including diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in our work? And if not, how we might be able to change our own practices and policies internally to do it. A good example of this is vote.gov. So TTS manages vote.gov. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is to reimagine that particular website, to think about how we might be able to improve access to stakeholders who are otherwise underrepresented in the electoral processes, and making sure that they have access to information in languages that they're familiar with, and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to promote equity and accessibility throughout all of our products within TTS, and helping our agency partners do the same.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. Hey, before we turn this over to the audience for questions, because I see we have several, I'm going to throw one more back at you, Maria, on the IT workforce. This seems to be a constant challenge. And could you give us your thoughts on how we truly enhance the IT workforce or digital employees?
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for that question. I think it's not, when you talk about the workforce, right, I would step back and say, look at broadly the entire federal workforce, right? We have to have a workforce at large that's digital minded, right? So we're not, I'm not talking about just our IT workforce and training them and the use of tools, but this is the broader federal workforce, to make sure that every employee has the right skill sets and capabilities to be able to use technology to conduct their business and communicate and collaborate, right? Every employee is a digital employee, and technology is just accelerating the integration of all those digital elements into every work process, and not just turning a piece of paper to electronic, but also RPA, right? Automating those processes and then taking the next step and integrating AI into some of those. So we need to make sure that we take into consideration every single federal employee, not just those who work in the IT department, when we're talking about building our capabilities and our skill sets, because it's so often that the partnership between technology and the mission, the business owners, the mission and the folks that work in that space really need to understand technology and how it can help and enable the mission. So it's not just, using email and collaboration tools, but also understanding how technology can help. And this really was put front and center with the pandemic. Congressman Connolly talked about it. Dave, we've been talking about this, seems like forever now. But again, having digital employees in the workforce to be able to take advantage of the tools and technology, I think is just so incredibly important. And it's not just the council with the Data Science Academy and the cybersecurity reskilling. It's the broad workforce at large and being able to be a digital workforce.
Excellent point, Maria. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience now. I see we have several in there, and Malini or Jasmine, if you want to fire those up.
Yeah, Dave, I have another question from Maria following up on her mention of the TMF board's efforts to review proposals. This is again from Jason at FNN. How many proposals did the board get by June 2nd? Any breakdown that you can offer in terms of numbers or percentages across the 4 main areas that OMB highlighted?
Thanks for that. So I'm not going to get into any numbers here, but we've gotten, like I said earlier, just a lot of proposals from across the entire federal government, components, agencies, bureaus, and they run the gamut of all of those 4 broad categories. So the PMO is working through all of those initial project proposals. The board has already started reviewing some of those. And so the work is going to continue on that. I'm just not going to get into any numbers here. Sorry, Jason.
Thank you.
I will toss it back to Jasmine, who has a couple more audience questions.
So this question is for Maria and Dave. The question is, as more government challenges are requiring a whole of government effort and more collaboration and sharing of the addressing the challenges across federal, state, and local governments, how is that being addressed, and how do you see that fitting into the efforts?
All right, I'll jump in, Dave, and you want to add on? Yeah, you know what? When you look across the federal government, the federal agencies, there is so much intersection. When you talk about the horizontal collaboration, the horizontal work that goes on across federal agencies, there's also a ton of work that goes through with state and locals. So it's just as imperative as we are continuing our modernization journey, continuing to transform, that as we're doing our work with our states, that we've got a good partnership with them. And I know, Dave Z, I'm going to turn it over to you because you're doing a lot of work in that space. But the pandemic really highlighted that vertical with the states, not just the horizontal across the federal government.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I think as we think about the work that we do in the federal government, it's really easy to sort of say, okay, well, this is my agency, or this is your agency, or this is my program, and this is your program. But from the public's perspective, they just want the damn systems and the damn websites to work, as it were. And so I think one of the challenges that we have, and really one of the opportunities that we have as a federal government, is to think about how we can be more integrated with state and local, how we can be integrated with our other agencies, and making sure that we're thinking about the touch points that the public has with the government, and making sure that, as Congressman Connolly said, is seamless. That is hard work. It is not simple. But one of the things that I'm really gratified by is that we have a great relationship with OMB and working to sort of identify programs where we can have some opportunities to intersect with state and local government. So, for example, login.gov a few months ago announced that it is available to state and local governments that are using federal programs and federal funds, and that creates an opportunity for states to have the same login experience and authentication and identity proofing experience that a federal agency might have. And I think that's just a really great opportunity to tackle things like unemployment insurance. So, for example, 18F is working with the state of Wisconsin to help with their unemployment insurance modernization, which is one of the things that Congressman Connolly noted was a priority as part of the pandemic as well. And so I think where we have opportunities to work in state and local, it can really make a big difference. And then also, I think across the federal enterprise, thinking about how we invest in shared services, how we take practices that are learned from one agency and share that out. Sort of as Maria mentioned with respect to the TMF, making sure that we don't just look at programs in isolation, but we get the broader picture is really, again, not easy work, but is critical work if we're gonna be serious about taking the public's view about working with government as opposed to the agency view about working with the public.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We've got time for probably a couple more here.
Okay, one more. I'm going to combine a couple that I'm seeing here. There's a couple of questions, Maria, that talk about how your office could potentially work closely with human capital efforts and look at recruitment and retention of IT professionals, giving them more work flexibility, using technology to attract the younger generation into government IT. You want to add anything or comment on that?
Yeah, you know what? We've the CIO Council and the Chico Council work pretty closely together on a lot of workforce initiatives. And frankly, I think there's some opportunities, in my opinion, to really tap into a workforce certainly outside of the DC area, right? We've all been teleworking, but take some positions, right? You know, higher graded positions, and turn those into career ladder positions like, 579s or 7911s. Folks coming out of, young people coming out of high school, coming out of college, they're digital natives. Why not start bringing people in directly? Maybe they don't have a college degree, or maybe somebody's been, in the military for 4 years and they've got some experience. Start bringing those career ladders back in and take advantage of some of that. And it's not just, hiring and retention. We know there's a lot of challenges around that. And frankly, working for the federal government is about the really cool stuff that the federal government does that you will never do in industry. And we have to do a better job of marketing ourselves in that space, because it really is exciting. And a lot of the work that we do, how do you impact in the impact that we can have as technologists with the work that we do? I think there's a lot of opportunities. We've worked with, I mentioned the cyber reskilling and the federal data, the work around the data scientists, but we need to do more of that. And we really need to take a focused effort on how we're recruiting and how we're bringing people into the federal government, and really look at some of those career ladder opportunities, because I think they are, in my opinion, hugely beneficial to help with our workforce.
If I could just piggyback a little bit on that, TTS in many respects is we often think of ourselves a bit as a tech talent pipeline, in the sense that whether it's the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program, where we're explicitly bringing folks in from industry to help bring innovative ideas into government, or whether we're thinking about the Centers of Excellence or 18F or beyond. We really try to focus on bringing the best talent available in the market, again, whether they're in DC or not in DC, and having them join government. But I think one of the things that we often fail to appreciate and talk about as a government is that it's not simply enough to recruit talent. It's really important to empower talent and retain talent. And that means everything from making sure that they have the tools and resources that they need to be successful, having a real focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and making sure that we do everything that we can to promote a workplace where people can see themselves and be successful in that workplace and be better off for their time that they spend here in government.
And I think, Dave, I want to add on to that, Dave, and it's on top of having the skills and the talent, is having the aptitude and the motivation to want to learn. So even if you're not walking in the door as a GS-15, you're coming in as a GS-579, you may not have all of the technical skills. You may not have gone to college, but guess what? You may have the aptitude and you have the wherewithal to want to be able to learn and have that motivation. And I think that is really, really, I think that's just as critical.
Thank you, Maria. We're hitting the end of our hour here. So Maria and Dave, I really want to thank you for your excellent insights and for your leadership. I love talking to both of you with the energy and passion that you bring. And as everyone can see, it's a great time for federal IT, given leaders like Maria and Dave. And as we heard today, there are really a lot of common priorities across branches of government and amongst leading organizations in the executive branch, where many of us in this meeting will have an opportunity to work collectively on. So again, I'd like to thank each of you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us today. MITRE Center for Data-Driven Policy will be holding some future events on related topics. We hope you can join us down the road. And until then, you can stay connected with us at mitre.org/policy center. Again, Dave and Maria, thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Bye, y'all.